All right. Okay. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Madison Elementary School District Board to order. Danielle, will you please call the roll? We're looking forward to it tonight.
President Holcomb.
Here.
Vice President Gresham.
Here.
Member Causey.
Here.
Member Spear. Here. Member Thompson.
Present.
All are present.
Thank you. Mr. George, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That brings us to adoption of the agenda. Is there any member of staff or the board want to make any changes to the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Causey, seconded by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Next up is the call for an executive session, if any is necessary. Is an executive session necessary? Seeing no need for an executive session, that moves us down to Section 3, Communications and Announcements. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, Vice President Gresham, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. It is hard to believe this is the last board meeting in May, and tomorrow is the last day of school. It has been absolutely incredible to see all the parent volunteers back on campus this year. Parent partners help to make our schools truly special places. This school, our volunteers from across the district, spent more than 26,500 hours supporting our students in school communities. We just truly value that partnership. Over the last few weeks, I've attended many events. I want to highlight IB International Baccalaureate Night at both Simus and Meadows, and STEAM Nights at both Camelview and Park. I was amazed at the students' creativity and passion for their work, and I want to thank the mentors that mentored each IB group at elementary and middle. The students felt so valued, that their work was important to adults, and that they truly could make a difference. It was a really impressive process. Congratulations to our promoting 8th grade class of 2023. You are to be celebrated for your hard work and your dedication. Please come back to visit all of the adults who shared in your journey. It makes us educators so happy when you come back to visit. We cannot wait to see all that you've accomplished. And I was so impressed with all the promotion ceremonies that I captured one sentence of advice from each principal that I'd like to share tonight. So Principal Chris Merrill from Madison Traditional Academy said, "Today you celebrate your past, but tomorrow you will shape your future." Principal Casey George at Madison No. 1 said, "I wish each and every one of you the best high school experience. Like Madison No. 1, the more you put into it, the more you will get out of it." Sage advice. Principal Rebecca Galindo from Madison Park said, "Continue to do the things that set you apart at Madison Park when you go to high school and college, and make us proud." Miss Katie Clark, principal of Meadows, shared a bit of advice, including practice gratitude. Cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to us, and to give thanks continuously. Practicing gratitude means that we acknowledge that there's enough and we are enough. A special thanks to all the staff who supported our students this year. It has been an incredible year. You are amazing educators, and you make an impact on students' lives each and every day. I hope everyone's summer is filled with enjoying family and friends, balanced with some adventure and some relaxation. May you and your family find time to do what brings you joy. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer.
Thank you. Ms. Gresham, you get to go first this evening.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. Yes, the graduations were wonderful. So thank you to all the schools for putting those on, and all the families that attended It's always nice to be a part of those. And I've been helping out with some end of year and eighth grade festivities at number one. So that's been fun. And Mr. Holcomb, actually, I think we all had the chance to tour the new buildings at Madison Park. So that is going to be an amazing campus, and we're really, really excited for that. And other than that, have a good summer, y'all.
Thank you. Ms. Spear.
Thank you. I don't really have much to add that my colleagues have already stated, except to say congratulations to our eighth graders on being promoted to high school, and thank you to all of our staff, teachers, certified, classified, everybody for making this year happen. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Kazi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add on to what Spira mentioned. I know at the beginning of this year, especially when we were doing the beginning of the year reports from the schools, it was I think we had expectations it was going to be a totally normal year, and that wasn't the case. But I feel that despite the challenges that our administrators and our faculty, our teachers, and all the support staff faced, we have really finished the school year in an incredibly strong way. And I think the promotion ceremonies we just experienced were a true reflection of that. To see the parent participation, I think I saw as many parents from Park than I saw at the MTA ceremony. So much about the community that we have built since the pandemic really played a role in somewhat destroying that community. So thank you for all the hard work you've done. I just felt like today was and yesterday was such a culmination of like what we accomplished. Just seeing that on the stage, it was huge, and so much of that is because of the work you all do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
So much has happened in the last 2 weeks of the year. The PTO luncheon was wonderful to connect with all the parent leaders who help make our schools fantastic. The exhibition nights I attended at Simus, it was so great to see those students engaging in their learning. The REACH students had their awards for first through eighth graders. And I wanted to mention that the third grade class, our REACH students at Madison Heights, recently earned highest honors in the 22-23 Word Masters Challenge. It's a national vocabulary competition. They actually they were 9th in the country, the class. So a class of 28 of our students out of 125,000 that participated. One of our students was one of 41 students who had a perfect score, and another third grader earned high honors. So kudos to the third grade class and to Miss Andreessen for her work. Camel View Scene Mite was so amazing to see all of those families engaged and the kids just excited to show what they had learned. And then to piggyback off of what's also been said about the promotion ceremonies, it was just so beautiful to see all of those families there, but more importantly, hear the students who spoke to their class talk about resiliency, what they've taken away from their experience at each of their schools, how they're looking forward to high school, and the community that they've built. So, that is in no small part not just to their engagement in our community, but parents and teachers and staff. So thank you all. It really I think it filled all of our cups, but it's wonderful to have that experience, and we look forward to seeing what all of those eighth graders do in years to come.
Thank you. Yes, I got the opportunity to go to the STEAM nights both at Park and Camel View. What really struck me, besides the creativity and that, at both schools, how much the community was really, really involved. And then you see the delight of the students. But what I also got was seeing the delight of the teachers. The teachers were just enjoying it so much because of the creativity and how their kids had gotten into it. That was really compelling. And this has been, I think the word that said is we finished strong. I think there's been a strong year. It hasn't been perfect. There have been challenges, but I think we came into it strong and really finished it even stronger. And I'm really looking forward to next year because I feel we've got so many good things set in motion. We've gotten back to, I think, the foundations of what makes Madison, now that we put it. And I'm looking forward to putting that all behind us. And then it's sort of, I enjoyed the promotions I got to go to, but it's always somewhat bittersweet because it's the end of the year. And those students and that they're going, I mean, you really look forward to the future and that too. But, as they say, this is the end of this one, but we got a great one coming up next year. And with that, next up is the consent agenda. Any member of staff or the board wish to remove anything from consent agenda for separate discussion or vote? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Move to approve as presented?
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Thompson, second by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. Who's the culprit? You want to revote? Oh, there it is. And that passes unanimously finally. And I am happy that the consent agenda passed now because Ari can stop telling me the reason I can't buy my season tickets for the Madison is because we haven't voted on his shows. So, okay, that brings us up to calls to the public. Danielle, do we have any calls to the public?
We have no calls to public.
All right, very good. Next up is information items, number 6. Item 6.1, the reach update. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, I'm going to first turn it over to Ms. Marshall to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, President Holcomb, members of the board. As you know, we have set up signature programs for all of our campuses, and what really helps set them apart is that they continue to evolve based on a current trend and current need, and we are seeing different trends and needs for our REACH signature program. So tonight, to give us that overview, Casey George, our Director for Signature Programs, in one more day, currently filling in as the interim principal for Madison number 1.
Thank you, President Holcomb, members of the board, cabinet. It's my honor. It's been a while since I got to present in front of you guys. I've enjoyed my principalship, but the one thing I missed, I didn't get to present my PSYOP to you guys. That's one of my favorite things to do. All right, but now I get to present tonight. So I'm super excited. And do I get to control the slides here? Oh, I do, yes. Okay. So we had our REACH steering committee because as we looked at the potential vision of Park, we thought, okay, what would it look like at Park? Would be any differences, similarities, that type of situation? So we pulled in a committee, and a lot of committee members were like, wait a minute, we don't want you to forget about Madison number 1. So it really became, what do we want the vision to be regardless of location? And we had several parents, as you can see, as our committee members. And we started off, and I have to give Ms. Ball a lot of credit. Ms. Ball led the way on doing these activities that led us here. And you can see what our vision was. The Madison REACH program is a leader and model for profoundly gifted education in the Phoenix area, providing students personalized support, mentorship, and learning experiences to maximize their potential and opportunities as local and global leaders. A wonderful vision statement. We're going to get a little bit more specific. So these are the commitments that are related to that vision. So we have specialized training for REACH teachers. We currently do that right now, but that we're going to continue doing that. Create an on-campus gifted endorsement opportunity. Now, this is something our teachers love, because as soon as we get an idea, we also take it to the teachers as well to see how they feel about it. And so the teachers love this because a lot of things we do, we provide professional development all the time during TCT. And why not give teachers credit that they can actually apply to their certification? And I think the state law changed recently, and I think that's what's going to enable us to do something like this. Recommend a stipend for gifted endorsed REACH teachers. We've recommended it before, but that's all part of the budget process, but that is a committee recommendation. Provide professional development on a gifted education for all sites with REACH students, which again, we do currently. COVID did blow a lot of things up. One thing that it definitely blew up was our vertical articulation. The other thing that kind of blew up our vertical articulation is the fact that we had high turnover at the middle school. So we've always, during the summer, gotten the entire 1st through 8th grade team together and talked about vertical articulation. But then again, times challenges happen and such. So we're looking to bring that back, as well as some dedicated TCT time to get that 1st through 8th grade vertical articulation. The classroom experience really comes out. A lot of remember, these parents are here. They really focus on classroom experiences, what's going on in the classroom. And so the highlights don't have any significance other than make it easier to read each point. But the optimizing student-teacher ratios, again, we do that already within our system. Unique supplemental materials, that again, we actually have always done. Being a signature program, they get a special budget through signature program. All the signature programs do. Foreign language opportunity. Notice it doesn't say Spanish. What is the foreign language opportunity we're going to look to as the future? It very well could be Spanish. It could be coding. Coding can be considered a foreign language. It could be maybe parent option to choose. Maybe they want Mandarin and we do something unique. But keeping all those top possibilities out there. Mentoring opportunities. If you're next to the high school, you do have high school students that can help mentor middle school. And can we look for some possibilities of getting the middle school kids to mentor the Heights Reach kids? We've done it a little bit in the past, but maybe we can really expand that. Again, in-school field trips with field experts. We do that. We had a challenge this year, but we do that. Self-contained reach sections for ELA math. That is one thing we've consistently held on to. So as kids go from the Heights program to number 1, the 5th through 8th is only reach kids are allowed in reach math or reach ELA. And so we protect that. Integration with general education for social emotional learning. That social emotional learning applies to all our schools. And so including reach in those goals and objectives. Extracurricular activities. Again, parents are like, what else can we do for reach? Now, these are not just for reach. A lot of these can include other kids as well. But sometimes, as we can see with our latest competition, reach kids can go into certain areas and certain competitions and have certain clubs that maybe at their correct level could really participate in, that maybe other kids aren't quite ready for. Looking for all types of opportunities for extracurricular activities, not just the typical ones you may find at one of our schools. Proposals for future consideration is a self-contained advisory period. So advisory, if you're not quite familiar, we have about 30 to 45 minutes in the morning where that is the go-to person for that child. That's an adult representative for that child, and they talk about social, emotional type things. Well, is it in the best interest for reach kids in 5th through 8th grade to have their own advisory period with only reach kids? That's actually somewhat debatable. So it's a proposal for future consideration. So what that means, I got a lot of parents saying, yes, that's what we want, and I got a lot of parents saying, no, that's not what we want. But what do we do as Madison? We have a good habit of listening and working and trying to figure out that situation. But that was one of the proposals that came out. Self-contained science for reach students. As I said, in middle school we have self-contained math and language arts. But when you move to a smaller school like Park, there might be an opportunity because of the numbers, just the sheer size of the school. So we're just going to take advantage of any opportunity that we have. Partnership with Madison Highland Prep. Again, if you're right next door, I am so fortunate that we now, in Madison, have 2 8th grade teachers at number 1 that can teach calculus. That is something to boast for. I'm going to tell you right now, that is amazing because most of the time they want to go to high school, but you can't guarantee that. So being next to Madison Highland Prep gives us a partnership like that, could give us an opportunity because at the reach minimum, reach kids get geometry, high school geometry by the time they graduate or promote from 8th grade. So having that partnership with Highland Prep can be very beneficial. And one of my personal favorites is just an idea, is the GEP. You might have been familiar with the DEP, Differentiated Educational Project. We keep that, of course, but a GEP, a guided engineering project, instead of coming out of language arts and social studies, a special project that can come out of math and science, which would be pretty cool. Some of the things we talked about earlier that you guys talked about with IB. So very cool. Program location. I think I get to turn this over to you, Dr. Garin.
Thank you, Mr. George, and I really appreciate your leadership with all of this effort while running a school, so thank you. All right, so we want to talk about program location. So I'm going to start with our summary of process and parent input. We started with a January 12th meeting just to gauge interest and see how families would feel about a move to Park. And of course, parents wanted to know more. They wanted to be involved in the process. They were, some were excited about it and some were nervous about it and had a lot of hesitation. So that's why we developed the REACH Steering Committee, and we didn't just ask for representatives. Any parent that wanted to be on the committee could be on the committee. So it was very inclusive. We had 3 separate meetings and talked about the strengths of the program, such as the ELA and math, self-contained things we wanted to keep, and other things we wanted to enhance, like providing supportive teacher training, a hard-to-fill stipend, all of those things. And what Mr. George presented with the commitments, those are commitments that are going to happen regardless of program location. So what was really great about this group is not only did we come up with some ideas and suggestions, we reached consensus and made a commitment to implement those next year. So sometimes you give input and things don't really happen, and that can be frustrating. So these are actionable in a way to enhance the program. Then we had a large group, this room was packed, May 15th meeting to share the program enhancements from the steering committee, and those were well received, and then really present the recommendations for middle school program location. And then we asked for individual feedback. We asked for parents to put their name, the children's grades, and how they really felt about the relocation, because it was such an important decision. So this shows the current grade level of students. We actually had more than 76 responses because some people have 2 children. So it was closer to the mid-80s. And you'll notice that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th, we got the most responses. Current 7th and 8th graders, though they have an opinion on a program they love, they won't be impacted by the move. And 1st grade, I think it just seems a long way off. So this next slide really shows you how it broke out, and this is everyone together, all of the data. And so if you look, almost 70% either support or strongly support the move, almost 8% are neutral, and a little over 22% did not support the move. And that was pretty consistent throughout. The next is very interesting because it's by grade level. So you can really see, and the number represents how many families strongly agreed. So for example, if you look at 5th grade and 6th grade, they were almost evenly distributed. There's a little bit more on the agree and strongly agree, but they really are, they did not come to consensus in regards to wanting to move. So for example, in 5th grade, 9 families strongly agreed with the move, and 3 agreed, but 5 either disagreed or strongly disagreed. And then you can look at 6th grade as well. And I really heard from so many families from these 2 grade levels. And it's not surprising because they already are at Madison #1. So some absolutely want to stay at the school that they love. They love the fine arts. They don't want to disrupt their students' middle school experience. Some families were very passionate about the new opportunities at Park, the high school partnership, the STEAM programming. So both groups were looking at their individual child and seeing what was right for them. And so to be child focused, we really looked for a solution that was an and both, that would meet the needs, because truly, how could you argue with any of that? That's all very true. The new program is very exciting, but Madison #1 is a wonderful school. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we've landed on. So in the 23-24 school year, no one will move. We're going to open up the new Madison Park building, but 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th will be at Madison #1. All of those families will experience the commitments and enhancements that we will be rolling out next year. In 24-25, we will move 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, but there will also be an opportunity to remain at Madison #1. So there's going to be a 7th, 8th combination class at Park and a 7th, 8th combination class at #1. With 33 students in both 7th and 8th grade, we have enough students to do it, and Mr. George assures me that it would work very well. Multi-age actually works very well with gifted students because we have such a large spectrum of learning and learning needs. One student could be 3 years ahead in math and 1 year ahead in ELA, and so it's really about differentiation even for gifted students and meeting their unique needs and keeping them challenged and engaged. So that is our goal. In 25-26, 26, there will be the 8th grade still at Madison number 1, with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th at Madison Park. And we're going to get creative, even with, we've had smaller classes before with REACH, so we will continue to keep that 8th grade group for ELA and math for REACH. But what we're going to do is we can look at some creative ideas, like a 3-week project-based learning opportunity where at the end, both groups get together to share out their results, and they can do some streaming together, still do the group field trips. So we're not that far away, and we have a lot of technology, so we're going to get creative. And then by 26, 27, we will have everyone moved over to Park, and all the students in Heights will matriculate to Madison Park. What I really like about this plan is it is student focused for the students that are currently at Madison number 1, and let parents make the decision that meets the best interest of their child. And this just shows you the student count by grade level. It is a little confusing because it's not happening next year. So in my parent letter that I sent out earlier this morning, I included this chart so you can look up and see what grade is your child right now, how many students are currently in the REACH program, and what year that the program is moving. So you can see our current 5th and 6th graders are the ones that would have that option for their 7th and 8th grade year. 4th grade would move over to Madison number 1 for 1 year and then move to Park, and 3rd, 2nd, and 1st would automatically go to Park. We're very excited to once again highlight the opportunities at Madison Park, a new state-of-the-art facility that you all just recently toured that I saw it a couple weeks ago. It sounds like I need to go back. With action labs, maker spaces, science lab. I'm very excited to work with Dr. Clark and the principal of Madison Highland Prep for high school credit opportunities, for that STEAM collaboration. They have Project Lead the Way, all of those things. On-site Robotics, the STEAM signature program challenges students to think critically and come up with their own solutions, and they actually have these creative spaces to do so. We have the enhanced after-school opportunity with the 21st Century Grant. We're committed to foreign language for the families. They really were passionate about that, and we still have even though we don't have the signature program of fine arts, there's some spectacular fine arts electives over there, and I think we all experience, anyone who went to STEAM night could see that. So I would just like to entertain any questions, and Mr. George and Ms. Marshall's here for questions as well.
Ms. Kazi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation. Thank you so much. I have a quick question about your extracurricular activities and after-school club. So first question is the goal to provide variety or serve the most students? So that's one. And then secondly, because for example, Odyssey of the Mind, a team is only 6 kids. However, Odyssey of the Mind is kind of an interesting opportunity because in China, there are schools that are based just on teaching Odyssey of the Mind. And when they come to the world competition, they tend to do really well because they've spent a lot of time on their projects. So there's just some interesting, some of the things that you're looking at as extracurriculars could be embedded even in the day, and you have kind of a built-in curriculum that's kind of interesting. So just a thought.
Yeah, I think the original part of the question was maybe focused on a bunch of kids, or maybe just
what are your goals of the extracurricular activities?
So when it gets just as a goal, to be honest with you, it's not so much a goal the way you defined it as much as I proactively work with a REACH council on a monthly basis, and when someone has an idea, we put it forth and ask ourselves those exact questions: who's this going to affect? How many kids? What's the financial investment it's going to be? And we balance that all out. So it's not really like a goal per se it's just taking advantage of whatever situation we can.
Ms. Thompson.
First, I want to thank the administration for so thoughtfully engaging parents across the board on this. It's a move is always challenging, and there was a lot of participation to have that meeting about a week ago. Now, not only was this room full, but you failed to mention that online was full with, I think, 30 or 40 people online watching, and just to have that presentation available for parents who couldn't make it here at 5 o'clock. I got a lot of feedback from people that they were very grateful for that. I'm thankful that we really listened to the parents and found this solution that's very student-focused. I'm glad we're going to be able to do some of these programs. I know COVID did a number on some of the clubs and organizations at number one, so to be able to bring those back, not just for REACH students, but for all students to participate in, I think is going to be really great for not only number one, but eventually over at Park too, some other engagement. And then finally, I think this conversation has also opened my eyes up to some challenges we might have with ensuring that we're differentiating instruction for all our students, not just for REACH students, but for gifted students, for students who are in special education, who are being mainstreamed. And I think that this whole conversation has really, I think, helped to shine a light on some of those issues, both at the early elementary level and at the middle school level. So I'm hopeful that those will be addressed in the coming months too. So thank you.
Ms. Spear.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And again, for the thoughtful approach that was taken with regards to a program move. We've had programs move in the past, and I think this is the most labor-intensive process that the district has gone through to date. And to that end, I do have can you help allay any concerns that I may have with regards to having a split program? And also from a resource standpoint, having a handful of 8th graders at Madison number one when the rest of the program is at Madison Park. How is that serving the program as a whole? How does that not create division? And then also from a resource standpoint, we have to be equitable across all of our students. And how many 8th graders would potentially be sitting at Madison number one in the 25-26 school year? And what would class sizes look like for those students?
Sure. Okay, there's a lot there, so I'll make sure I answer all your questions within that. So speaking for the split, REACH historically has had kids small class sizes as low as 7. And as we have this year, this is the first time we've ever been maxed out at a particular grade level. And if you take a look, what we do is we make combination classes in order to make sure that we're equitable with all our teachers and ratios. And the other thing we do is in the upper grades is that's where we have those joint social studies and science classes. And that's why it's hard to explain sometimes to parents why they have a large science or social studies class, but that's part of the equitable type situation. So we've had small class sizes before, and I think it's quite doable. But with today's technology and what COVID taught us is that we can have a lot of connections and unifying things. I'm actually I ran Madison Virtual Academy, and so we had teachers working from home, and I have to tell you, if you read I surveyed the parents every month, and the kids. And because boy, Madison Virtual Academy, you have to know whether or not, during COVID, whether or not they were getting what they needed. And it was amazing, the difference. And to be honest with you, the teacher makes all the difference. I'd like to take a lot of credit for a lot of stuff, but man, do teachers make a difference. And so you wouldn't believe the positive reinforcement we got on those online classes and such. So I do have a lot of confidence that we are going to be able to connect the two programs and such. And I do think we'll have enough that again, when you even though you have a real small math class, that is sustainable when you have a large school of 1,000 kids at Madison number one. We have enough FTE to do that. I can do that in 1 or 2 sections. I can also do that, and I also, if you didn't know, I do that for the other signature programs. So we might have a maximum of 22 kids in a dance class because it's advanced dance, and they have to audition for it. So we kind of, as we try to promote signature programs, we always keep equity as a fair-minded type thing. But at the same time, I truly believe that we can have a quality program, and I think we can definitely still be equitable with all kids.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. There have been years that I think when we were very early on our governing board where equity really was an issue. And so, like, for instance, when there were 7 students in that class, that was an enrollment issue. That wasn't because it was a fundamental part of the program necessarily to provide smaller class sizes. And so it created And you were here for that as well.
Yes,
And
yeah.
so it is something I just want to make sure we're mindful of, because I'm looking at this and that was something I don't want to go back to. And so that we're mindful of some of the things that we have learned from the past. So thank you so much.
Can I add one more thing, Board Member Spear? Because it's a really good point, and it did weigh on our minds. So when you look at the 24-25 school year, the 7-8 combo is one teacher, and the 7-8 combo is one teacher. So if we were to just typically take the 7th grade and the 8th grade, that would take 2 teachers, and this takes 2 teachers. So 24-25 is, should be cost neutral. 25-26 does require an extra teacher, not an extra teacher, an extra 2 sections, one of ELA, one of math, and Madison number 1. But it is only for 1 year to help us through the transition. We would not be able to sustain that, but we felt like it was the solution to make the transition student focused. But I agree, we have to be very careful and thoughtful. We have fantastic signature programs, and we need to make sure we're equitable.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Gresham?
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments, and thank you both for your work on this. And yeah, it's been a very thoughtful process, so it's great. And thank you for the presentation. So one of my comments is, actually, these are really great suggestions for improving the program, and I would strongly suggest that a lot of these suggestions could be applied to all our special programs. So yeah, they're really, really good ideas. And did we talk about this before? Are we going to have at some point, I would love to have an update from all our special programs, like we had the IB coordinator in. I would love to hear from every special program at some point to have an update. So I don't know if we had that.
Board Member Gresham, I'd love to continue that next year. We started with some of the programs, and I absolutely think it's a great idea, because as part of the strategic plan and coming out of COVID, our focus is really taking those to the next level.
That would be great. And then going along with what Ms. Thompson mentioned, maybe this can enhance our identification of gifted students as well, maybe from some of the schools that, we don't get as many gifted or reached students. So I would love to make sure that we are identifying everyone that eligible. So thank you. That's it.
Ms. Thompson?
Kind of to piggyback off of that point, kind of a double part question. I think I asked this last time, but are we universally testing 2nd graders for gifted testing now?
I don't know if you want to answer that or not, but I'm pretty sure we are now went back to 2nd grade. All 2nd grade gets tested.
It's a state requirement,
Okay.
and the state actually does provide those tests, funds the money for those tests.
Even
And so,
better.
yes, we do provide that testing.
So that actually leads to my second question, because that 14 students is the number of students who are in the 2nd grade class today. But I'm sure there's a larger number that are going to be entering in the 3rd grade. I actually know at least 2 parents who told me their kid tested in. So I'm just wondering if we know, because as we universally test the 2nd graders, we're probably going to have some higher identification. So the 3rd grade class will grow and, further through the program. So I'm not sure if we have the numbers yet of the identified group, which might not end up being the students who are in the REACH program. And sorry to ask that off the top of your head.
No, thank you, Member Thompson and governing board members and cabinet. This is the 2nd year that we have done the universal testing for all 2nd graders, and there are still some testing cohorts to be completed. We actually offer more testing dates than required by the state and throughout the year. So as students are identified, families are notified, but we do have many families who choose another signature program, even if their child does test for the Profoundly Gifted REACH program. And then we do have gifted at all of our elementaries, and so many, even if they qualify for Profoundly Gifted, will choose that or choose Madison Traditional Academy. And at our middle schools, our gifted program is the advanced classes. So again, some families choose the signature program versus the Profoundly Gifted if their child qualifies.
Sorry, can I ask one more, just to
You have
clarify?
one more.
Just one. So we're testing every student. It's not if the parent, like a parent doesn't have to sign up for it or anything. It's done during the school day and everybody's receiving that.
For second grade,
In second
correct.
grade. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may, and I do apologize, but I think it's important as we look at this, in particular, our public looks at this, to understand the history. And I apologize to Mitra and Sarah. They've been part of this history even more. By the way, in response to the testing issue, you have to test extremely high, and there's some other levels of testing that a lot of time is used for getting into reach. And Casey and I have been through this. I was counting, and if you count the moves and grades, this will be the 5th move for reach. And to put it in context, reach is our first signature program. And actually the model for signature programs at least started with the idea of reach in its model. And it started at Madison Park. And my eldest daughter, who's now 32, was the 28th student in reach in 3rd grade. She tested in 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And then I had a son and a daughter who was, because of learning disability, it was sort of in and out of reach, depending on the certain levels they're looking at. The program was very small. It was at Park. And it had trouble for a long time. It was one of those things that we always thought it was on the chopping block because of low enrollment, both because of the high levels. And a number of people, to be perfectly honest with you, they didn't want to send their kids to Park. And actually, the reason they didn't want to send their kids to Park was one of the things I thought was an advantage of having my kids go to Park. And when the REACH program was at Park, it was really, in a large part, transformative for it. As that program grew, the participation of the community grew. It was an A school, an A+ school, and I was very sad to see it move from Park, but that moved to, it actually first moved, was at Park. As the program grew, it went into Camel View because Camel View fed into Park for the lower grades. And then, but there was a push from the parents, and rightly so, that looking at it to move it to number 1 when it was being started before the Spanish immersion, when it was at, and because it would fit there. And that is when the program really started to take off, is when at number 1. And then it, and Heights. And it was first at number 1, and then we moved from Camel View to Heights later because of the feeder schools. It's interesting now that we've gone through, this program has continued to evolve, and now it's evolved to the point where it is while it is a benefit, as all the signature programs are a benefit in some ways to number 1, it's also a issue at number 1 because of the multiple signature programs and the oversize. And now it is the perfect time to go back to Park. And I'm glad to see that being driven by parents, but it is also, we are in a unique position right now with the opening of Park and the new school, and that to take REACH back there where I think it will fit extremely well, and it will be a major plus. Not only will Park being a plus to the program, it'll be a major plus to Park as well. And so I think if people look at that, that you see that this is a very, very positive evolutionary move for a program like this. And also REACH is really the only program that you can actually move, because it's the only sort of self-contained program. One of the things that's important too, as you were talking about the after-school activities and that too, in my experience, it's been a while, but also watching the program for a long time, I think one of the most important components and issues from the REACH standpoint is that the kids who are there and the families who are there are not only just REACH families, but they are integrated in the school. I mean, that's why a number of the parents don't want to leave number 1. It's more because their kids are integrated in the sports and activity programs. And so these after-school program activities and that too should enhance and be open to, broader spectrum of the kids at the school. So I see this as huge positive. And I can't tell you how happy I am that both I think it's going to be a plus for number one, which has really grown and become its really own school, but it's going to be a big plus for Park. And this is really going to advance, I think, for everyone involved. I don't know, Casey, did I get any part of that wrong because about the history or how it developed?
That sounds exactly right.
Well, it's about time I got something right. Yeah. Yes. And I do want to thank you for how thoughtful and how inclusive this process was. At the same time, it wasn't just doing what the parents wanted. It was really helping mold that and put it into the situation to do the best for, I think, for the kids and the families and the schools involved. And I want to compliment everybody who involved, the parents, the families, and Casey, you, Dr. Guerin, everybody who was involved in this. One other thing I think I do want to point out, related to the 7th and 8th grade combination, by the way, combination classes were a keystone of REACH from early on because of the small numbers, but also because it allowed such growth for the kids. And so that's actually, in my mind, that's always been a plus. I was sad to see that go further away. But the 7th and 8th grade class combination in 24-25 and 8th in the 25-26 grade, that doesn't mean the teacher is doing that all the time. That is still a teacher who is available, particularly on that, because they're doing this one class. And that also helps lift the level of education for the other kids who are not in REACH, who can take advantage of that teacher. Is that correct?
Correct. For science and social studies, yes.
Yes, okay. All right. Well, thank you for letting me ramble on. Anything else in relation to this? Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
I just have one more thing to add. We'll be asking the parents of the 7th and 8th grade combo class by December, I believe, to make a decision and that will be the December of next year, so we can start scheduling and planning.
All right. Thank you very much. And now that brings us to the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee, excuse me.
President Holcomb, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, I'm turning it over to Ms. Garvey.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Guerin, and cabinet. Just really happy to bring forward some recommendations to the governing board tonight from the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. The charge of this committee, as you know, was to review our maintenance and operations and our bond program to see if it was the right time and if they believe that there would be community support to move both of these items to the ballot this November. The information I'm going to share with you is information that was reviewed by the committee to help them make their decisions on a recommendation. So we started looking at tax rates because one of the main tenets of any one of our fiscal plans that involves our taxpayers is to make sure that we are being fiscal stewards of the money that they do give to us. So in looking at our primary and secondary rate combined, we want to make sure, and we've been very steadfast in making sure that we do not raise our tax rate. You can see this has been our tax rate over the last 5 years. So it has gone from $4.35 down to $3.81 over the years. Part of that is due to an increase in our assessed valuation, which does help that, but we continually monitor that and make sure that we maintain or decrease our tax rate. When we look to give it more context around it, we look at how does our tax rate compare to surrounding districts to make sure that we are at least in alignment. As you can see here, Madison is the second set of bars, and we do have the lowest tax rate of our surrounding districts, all of which are elementary districts. We know that it's very important, and taxpayers and property owners want to know how much is this going to impact me and what is the cost. So the average assessed value of a home within Madison is $333,851. Sorry about that. As we know, this does not reflect full cash value. This is, again, assessed value. So when we look, and this is on secondary taxes, and I have to say secondary taxes are anything that the voters approve to levy upon themselves. such as the bonds, our maintenance and operations override, and our capital override. The total tax rate for those three combined items is almost $2.07, and that is per $1,000 of assessed valuation, which would come up on the tax for an average home in the district of $691. You can see the amount below that it is for each of those items respectively. And when we were looking at this, we were talking about a continuation of each of these items. The first item that we reviewed was the maintenance and budget override. Currently, we have one in effect. By law, they can be in effect for 7 years. You can levy an amount up to 15%, depending on what your voters have approved. That's the maximum amount. It is good for at 100% of the amount for the first 5 years, and then there's a third phase out in years 6 and 7. If it doesn't pass by the end of year 7, then it just phases out in year 8. It is 100% funded by the property owners within Madison, so it requires voter authorization. Our last one was passed in November of 19. Currently this year, that 15% allows us to increase our budget by $5.2 million. And then the first year of phase out would begin in 25-26, and you can see that would bring us down to 3.4 million, and then the last year phase out would be 26-27. We are, part of this was the conversation about should we go and ask the voters this November of 23? It would then take effect next school year, which would begin August of 24. So even though you do it in November, it's almost a full year before it goes into effect. And the reason that you would do that before it's over is that if it for some reason doesn't pass, then you can see why it didn't and what the voters would like to know more about to hopefully pass it the next year before the phase down begins. That $5.2 million is spent on curriculum and signature programs, some of which we just heard about. It is to recruit and retain our staff, and it is to provide the level of student and staff support services that we do. The money goes into our overall maintenance and operations budget, so it is expended in the same percentages that our M&O budget is. So you can see that 85% of it is in salaries and benefits, 77.2% in purchase service, and so on. So it does play a very important role in the finances of the district and providing the services that we do. And after we reviewed all the information, the committee is recommending to the board a continuation of the M&O override and a call for election this November. The next item that we reviewed is the bond program, which was last approved by the voters in November of 19, so it was the same year the M&O override was approved. It was for $90 million. The main uses here, as you can see, the largest item, I'm going out of order, but is the Madison Park rebuild. But that does include building a center for the developmental preschool and adding the community ed office over there, and that's at $47.5 million. We had to finish the Madison Meadows Phase 2 construction. We needed part of the money for this to finish the rebuild of Madison Meadows. That was $9.7 million. Then we have the Madison concession building, a cafe remodel, and furniture for the cafeteria at $4.3 million. As you have probably seen as you enter schools and you're looking around, we are in the middle of our front office safety remodels at $4.5 million. We also have other security measures going in. We have fencing, window treatments, the visitor badging. Some of those are completed, and some of these items are still in progress to be finished over the summer. That's $7.9 million. And then that leaves the balance in our life cycle projects, and it's just a little over $16 million. And while that might look like a very large number when you would replace an entire air conditioning, heating, cooling system on a school, you can be looking at $2.5 million alone for that one project. And this also goes towards pupil transportation vehicles. It could go towards roofing. I mean, major items of high cost. So we do try to stretch our dollars as far as we can. We do look for rebates wherever we can. And we do try to do more preventative maintenance along the way so that we can make sure that we extend the life as long as we can of all of our systems before they become detrimental. Our bond priorities, as we look at this and we look to the future, they can be divided into the 5 categories. So we have those life cycle projects, safety and security. We have a focus on energy conservation. Technology is also part of this, and then we have our construction and renovation. Just to give you an idea of some of the items that fall under these categories, life cycle projects, they are numerous, and they fall under multiple categories. So it can go anywhere from replacing the shade structures at a school to doing millwork, which is the cabinetry within schools. And over time, and a lot of wear and tear, and being in a school 20 to 25 years, it does need some of this work to be done. Safety and security, you can see the projects there, continue working on the fencing and some infrastructure. Energy conservation is a lot of lighting, converting things to LED, looking at technology, the network infrastructure. We're really putting everything up in the cloud and having a lot more infrastructure going on, and the computing device refreshes every 4 to 5 years. And then a lot, and the majority actually does go into constructing and renovating with campus replacement. And you can see the different items there. A bus lane, just talking about the community has expressed an interest many times over the past several years, especially about adding a bus lane that could help with, if not before and after school transportation, perhaps to a satellite, but after school athletics at Madison Traditional Academy. So we've looked at projects, whether they come to us from the community, from parents, from staff. We received a lot of input to come up with these lists, and I really would like to thank the staff at the schools. I'd like to thank our maintenance director, our construction director, along with all of our craft maintenance workers who are out there every day logging tickets, repairing, and really helping us do the studies with external consultants to determine what needed to be done for this proposed program. When you look at it in total, and if we were going to look at doing everything for these projects, you can see the amount of money that it comes in for at every category across, and the total that we discussed was just 5,000 short of 115 million. So we had a lot of discussion about these projects, and then after that, we looked at some considerations here that are on the bottom. So we talked again about the amount. We talked about what would be fiscally responsible to taxpayers and what do we think that they would support. As long as we maintain the current tax rate, we don't affect our ability sort of finance ourselves into the future and we can't do anything in the future. How do we ensure that does not happen? And we also talked about this last bullet here being flexible language. In the past, it has happened where there's been land or property that's been adjacent to one of our properties that we've purchased, and it's actually allowed us to improve our programs and our offering to our students. At the moment, we don't have anything in mind, but if you don't put flexible language within the ballot, you cannot act on it should something come up. So we talked about that item as well. We looked at an example bond program, and this is where we look to make sure, can we afford it? And we looked at, well, how would we spread a bond program out over the next 5 years as far as sales? And we look at our assessed valuation. We project it into the future. There are certain laws that we do have to follow. The first 5 years, your growth rate on your assessed valuation cannot be more than the average of the last 10 years, which our average was about 4.6. We built in 3.5 to be conservative. And then the next 10 years after that, or so many years after that, it can only be 20% of the 10-year average. And that for us is at 0.9. So really very conservative numbers that we used here for growth. And if you go all the way over to the right, you will see the estimated tax rate actually does even start to decline into the future. So, and again, we had parameters. We don't want to have our bonds outstanding more than 10 or 11 years. And that's all built within the proposed debt service calculations that are in the middle of the table. So based on that, the committee discussed, the first thing was, how much should this be? And there was conversation around it. There were some that thought we should ask for the full amount. Many were around that 100 to 105. So after some conversation, we did settle on 105 million as a recommendation that's coming forward. You'll see on the next slide. And if you wanted to know where the deducts were, again, this is fluid. Anytime you build a program, you do your very best to anticipate what's going to come up in the next 5 years. Sometimes things switch categories. Sometimes they come in an amount that you could be less or it could be more than your projection or your estimate. So again, these deducts can have some fluidity to them, but really looking at these categories, these were where we thought the best deducts would be. You can see that technology at 3.1 million. While this seems like, yes, that is a large percent of that line, we also do have our capital override, and we are constantly looking at how to best utilize our money. So working in conjunction with Ed Services, we can see if there's a year when we aren't going to do a textbook adoption, or maybe one that's not as large as another one, and actually do the technology under the capital override, which is allowable. So we felt that that would be a good place for that deduct. So the committee came forward with a yes recommendation to the board for an amount of 105 million, and then usage. So in the bond pamphlet, we would just build in addition to those categories that I showed you, it would say land, constructing, and renovating buildings. It's all in the same category, just in case something would come up that we think would enhance the district and our services. And I just really want to thank every member of the committee. They were very engaged, great questions. If anybody's interested, all of our presentations, they're all posted on the district's webpage under Community Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. And are there any questions?
Ms. Gresham.
No questions. I just want to say thank you as always, and Barbie, and thank you to the committee for all their work. And maybe just to remind our listeners, I'm sure it's posted, but the committee was community members, parents, who all was
Yes,
on
it was community members, parents, and district staff.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Cuzzy.
Thank you. Thank you for this very thorough report, and for all the volunteers who helped to make it possible. I was curious, I assume we have a replacement cost study that's done for all of our major buildings and infrastructure?
We do. So we of course have vendors or consultants in each of the areas that we can work with. We look at the, it's actually for the Phoenix area, the pricing too, and work with them to develop estimates. So we do our best to do all that estimating in the background, especially for a lot of the larger projects. We get the average cost. We do add in inflation factor, because even though, like, as you saw, there was a campus replacement on here, which is Madison Rose Lane, even if the bond is to be called for the election and it's passed in November, that building doesn't start in January. You may not even start the design process for a year or two, and the construction so might be 4 years down the road. So in really talking with the consultants and what do they see with pricing and what's happening, we do build in inflation or escalation costs. And then this past bond, I will say things were more out of control than we think we ever could have. So we do try to factor a little bit of that in as well, looking more historically than just the past couple of years.
Thank you. I asked that question because, so, obviously replacement cost studies help us understand like how long it's going to be till we have to replace these major parts of the building. And this is a question that if we do in fact decide to pass the resolutions that are on the agenda, I will be asked, is so specifically for the life cycles, how far does that take us into the future? Say the bond is passed in November. Do you have a sense of that? Because that is a question that is often asked.
It really depends. We do have a plan. We do have a plan. It really depends, though. Like in this bond, for example, it's one of the projects at Madison Camelview is to replace the air conditioning system that has been at Camelview for 23 years. So we know that that project is coming up in the near future. But when we have a newer school like Simus or Madison Meadows, honestly, we're hoping that's at least, well, they're different ages, of course, but we're hoping Simus is at least another 10 years out, and that Meadows is another 20 years out. So that would be a few bonds down the road.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson?
Let me turn the microphone on. You talked a little bit about the deducts for technology. Can you also talk a little bit about the deducts for the 5 million deduct for the life cycle projects and kind of what the thinking was behind that one in particular?
So our thinking behind that one when we looked is the first is that we really hope that with the new direction at the School Facilities Oversight Board, which regulates is responsible, their charge is responsible for the building renewal grants that go out to districts, that there is some new direction there with schools that will allow some of our bigger projects to actually get funded. So one of the projects that we have in the bond is that air conditioning at Madison Camelview. In the past, some of our buildings built with local dollars after 2001 are excluded from, at the moment, from allowing us to get building renewal grants. Madison Camelview was built prior to that, so we are hoping that that over $2 million project will be funded completely by SFOB. So we are really looking at what can we apply for. Are there grants? We just received a grant for over $200,000 for an electric bus, but yet the entire bus program is in that life cycle project. So we pulled out some larger items that we do feel we may be able to secure other funding for.
Thank you, and I think that also ties into one of the items we're going to talk about later about the state priorities, because to have what I think many people assume to have resources for the entire state, serving children, to have to be paid by our local taxpayers and then not being kept up with state dollars, it's something that we have to do. To have that question, how long is this going to last? Well, sometimes it depends on how much the state is going to put in to take care of the assets that we have. And I'm very grateful for the work that this district has done to maintain our assets, so we don't have an instance where a school has dirty air and students are worrying about whether they can go to school or not, or just air conditioning breaking and people not being able to go to school. So thank you, and thank the committee for all the work that you've done in putting this proposal together.
You're welcome. And if I may make a comment, I really just do have to thank the taxpayers, because I know that I am very fortunate when I go to meetings with other school districts around the state, and what Madison is able to do to keep our buildings up when some are just really struggling with their air conditioning, struggling with their foundations, struggling with so many structural things, and trying to educate students. So I just really feel very, very blessed for our taxpayers.
On that point, I think we cannot always emphasize, and should, the fact that the quality of the buildings, the comfort, the fact that a kid enjoys going to school, not just for the education, but because of the facilities. You know, it's air conditioning, it's, you know, everything works. It's happy. For example, Camelview, I always considered, even though it's an older school, it's one of the happiest places ever because it's just that welcoming. Park now is going to be a huge draw. Kids are going to get excited because of the quality of the buildings. The quality of the building is not a ego thing or anything at all. It is directly related to the education of our kids. Ms. Spear.
Thank you. And I would like to also piggyback a little bit on what you're saying with regards to the facilities that we do have, that they really are superb. And as a result, we are able to rent our facilities and recoup money and generate revenue from organizations and neighborhood groups and political parties and everybody else who wants to rent our space. We have competitive rates, and we are able to generate income from our buildings that we pour right back into our M&O budget. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that these buildings are also for rent and that taxpayers get money. We are able to really recoup more money from the investment that our Madison taxpayers make. Thank you.
And with that, unless there are other comments, thank you very much for an excellent report. That brings us up to action. Item 7.1, Arizona School Boards, oh, I said action, and then Arizona School Boards Association. Would you like to, Ms. Thompson, would you like to take the reins?
Thank you, Mr. President. At the last meeting, we had this as an information item. Each year, ASBA asks for school districts to give their top 5 priorities for their political agenda setting process for the following year. I know that the state budget just passed and the legislature is still in session, but we're already looking to the next legislative session. The priorities are very similar to those we've had in the past. They're up on the screen right now. I'll give a brief summary. The first one is related to consistent dedicated sources of base funding in all the areas we should have base funding from the state. The second priority has to do with teacher recruitment, educator recruitment, and retention. The third priority is in regards to consistent dedicated sources of capital funding, having to do a little bit of what we just talked about on the regarding the proposals for the bond. Item number 4 relates to removing the cap on the district additional assistance override and embedding that as an inflationary factor annually. And then the 5th item is to eliminate regulations, policies, and restrictions that overburden, criminalize, or politicize our school districts, our support staff, our educators as they educate and care for our students. So 4 of these items have to do with funding, and the 5th one has to do with letting our staff do the great work that they do in support of our students. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the priorities. Once these are, if they are so approved by the board, we will forward these to ASBA. They'll be discussed as part of their legislative committee and then brought in the fall to the full membership as they adopt their usually very lengthy, much more than 5-item agenda for the legislative session.
Well, and we've had the opportunity to discuss this before, and I want to thank you, Ms. Grissom, who put the time into really putting these together. I think they are, personally, I think they're excellent. Does anybody else have any comments? This reflects what we've been, the priorities we've been pushing for a long time. So if there are no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adopt these on behalf of the Madison School District.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Ms. Spear, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Please vote.
For the record, Ms. Thompson did the heavy lifting on this one. I just agreed with her suggestions.
And that passes unanimously. That brings us up to the budget update. Dr. Guerin.
President Holcomb, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, we were very pleased to receive our budget before June. And so that we could make it to this board meeting so that our staff will know their salaries before leaving for the last day of school tomorrow. So that was very exciting. So I want to thank Human Resources and Business Services for their incredible hard work in regards to phase 1 and phase 2 of this budget recommendations, because every contract had to be touched because of the parity study. So this was important work, but I really acknowledge how much work it was and the communication between the staff and our departments. They were very willing to meet individually with staff members. So I really applaud their collaboration and efforts. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Garvey for the first part, and I will finish up the second. Ms. Garvey.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Guerin and cabinet. As was mentioned, we have a state budget, and the state budget is a little bit different this year, so you'll see that reflected here in these two columns. We did receive some money that was built into the actual formula amount, so it will continue on into the future. And then we did receive some funding that is one-time only funding. So the first item to talk about is the increase in the amount that we get for maintenance and operations per student. The total increase to our formula amount was 2.92%. As you can see, inflation at 2% was $661,000. And then there was a statewide redistribution of the results-based funding monies. So this does mean that results-based funding has been eliminated. We do know that Madison was a recipient of some of those funds in the amount of $535,000. But when you take what we were getting, as we had such a large percentage of our student population covered by that, when you take Madison's proportion, pro rata portion of students to the state, we'll actually receive less from that redistribution. So we would receive $304,060. The total of the base support level increase between results-based redistribution and inflation is $965,000. District additional assistance, which is unrestricted capital, there was an increase to the formula amount of 9.38%, and that is all transferable. It's an allowable transfer to the Maintenance and Operations Fund, $251,000. So this, what you see here is what is being added to the maintenance and operation budget, what's being proposed. That brings our ongoing new monies next year, so to speak, to $1.2 million. And then you will see that one-time funding that's being distributed on the pro rata basis using Group A. So they take your regular ed student count, they weight it, and that's the number that gets looked at versus the entire state. And Madison's share of that is over $1.3 million. So quite a bit, as you can see, we will be receiving in one-time monies. When we look at that, there were a few other items when we look at our total budget and what we look at when we make budget recommendations. And to that, we do add any time that your base support level goes up, that is the amount that your M&O override is based on. So as a result, our maintenance and operations override will go up by $145,000. So we add that in there. That helps offset some of that loss of the results-based funding. And then we have the set aside that was noted before in April when the board passed the last budget, that we had $749,000 that we could reduce our carry forward. I'm sorry, I skipped a line. We had set aside from last year when we received additional funding, we had set aside $1 million to help us with the parity study. So the total amount that we were looking at for this year, both in budget advisory and IBN, at the end of the day was this $3.1 million, and then the one-time funding over there at the $1.3 million. Of that, the budget commitments that came forward and were approved in April totaled 2.8 million. That included the parity, the 1% for all staff, as well as a couple other items. But that brings the remaining balance that we have. And at the time, because the legislature had not finalized their budget in the state, both recommendations from both groups came forward to Dr. Guerin as if additional funds are available. And that's why I say they gave input to recommendations that are going to be coming up on the next slide. So I will turn it over to Dr. Guerin for her recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. So as you can see on this slide, the unallocated budget of ongoing funding is $311,000 and $160. The one-time funding is over $1.3 million. So we decided to recommend an additional salary increase of 1% for all staff, which just is a little bit over the ongoing funding. But if you look at the one-time funding, what we are recommending, and we looked at the list of recommendations very carefully from budget advisory and interest-based negotiations because they were wonderful suggestions. We all agreed on them. But we had to be careful because this one-time money is unique. And so what we don't want to do is put money into place for something that we're going to have to take away. That's really difficult. It feels like a pay cut. It feels like a resource cut. What we did decide, though, as the permanent subs were so popular and actually saves us some money in regards to sub allocation, right? That we wanted to expand that to every school because it made a difference in regards to how many times emergency sub plans had to be put in place. We end up hiring these permanent subs. There's so many benefits. So next year, each school will have one. Now, the 4 that we're going to have this year, we have to remember it is out of one-time money. So though we have a commitment to this because it is a pilot and it worked so well, we have to remember that it is one-time money, so it's not guaranteed for the future. In addition, as Ms. Garvey shared, if we were to put this into the salary schedule, it would feel like a pay decrease the next year. So we decided to recommend doubling the stipend, the retention stipend for employees. So in April, the board approved $600 for each employee. We're recommending doubling that to $1,200 per employee, and then they would receive that in the fall. And we're not planning on doing 2 different payments. It would just be a one-time payment for staff. We would also cover our negative balance in ongoing amount of the $38,000. We are confident we can recoup this in when we have unfilled positions, which we always do every year. So we felt comfortable recommending the additional 1%. So you can see that the ongoing amount is a negative $38,000, but the one-time funding will leave us some contingency. And so this graph, we really tried because the funding is complicated in Arizona, and in Madison, we have a tradition of maximizing employee compensation every year we get it. We don't hold on to it. I mean, we are fiscally responsible, but we understand with inflation that we need to compensate our employees, especially in this competitive arena where we're all fighting for a smaller pool of educators, but also because we value them so much. So if you look at the graph on the left, you can see in the 22-23 school year, the average pay increase was over 8%. The minimum a staff member would receive was 7.1%. The 7.1% was for everyone. We did do some initial decompression work. We had some real outliers that we couldn't wait for the parity study that we had to address, and that was a 1%. If you look up on top at the 23-24, the minimum salary increase, if this new package is approved, every employee would receive 4%. That was a minimum of 2% parity, and it ranged all the way from 2% to some employees are getting a 15% increase. It was based on the study. And then you already approved an additional 1% in April, and we're recommending 1 more percent, and that's the 2% salary increase you see underneath the parity. So, and if you look to the graphic on the right, this shows what we've done from 21, 22, all the way up to 23, 24, that there's an average of almost 14% increase over the last 2 years for employees. Now, that is the average. So since 2018, Madison teachers have received an average total increase of almost 37%, and classified staff have received an average total increase of just over 26%. Now, we understand with inflation and that we live in the state of Arizona, we would like to be able to do so much more. But this is maximizing the funding that we have been allocated, getting as much money as possible in staff pockets, while also planning for the future and being fiscally responsible. So the governing board is asked to approve the superintendent's additional budget recommendations for the 23-24 school year. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Spear.
Thank you so much for this presentation and for laying out all of the recommendations that we have all discussed at length. So this is something that we have talked about over many meetings. And so for the public, I just want to make sure everybody understands we have been doing our due diligence for the last several months with regards to the budget. And as far as the recommendations, I support all of them. And I think it is also very important to to note the stable increase that we have year over year in Madison and to provide some context, in some other school districts, the forecasting may not have been done in the same kind of way, and so they were left with a very large chunk of one-time money that they had to dump, they had to use, and but years previous, their staff did not see increases. And so it's very important for our staff to understand that providing increases every single year is a goal. And it is something that I cannot speak for my fellow board members, although I suspect on this point I may, and that is that we really do endeavor to provide an increase every single year. And we will always support an increase, even if it is only 1%. So with that, I support this and say thank you.
Ms. Kazi.
I just want to echo, I'm very happy with the recommendations. I'm very pleased that we were able to identify funding for the bulk of the priorities that both IBN and the Business Advisory Committee recommended. So when we came into finding out if there was going to be additional funding available, it was clearly being allocated to increases for salaries for our staff, as well as stipends because of the one-time money issue that we have to deal with some additional money for support. So thank you for this really solid budget. I think it will not only provide the increases that our staff so much deserve, it'll provide some parity, hallelujah, and also provide some additional supports that I think our teachers very much need, and will support them and help. Obviously, we'll see better outcomes in the classroom. Thank you.
I'd also like to point out that the salary increases are great, but we don't just focus on salary increases. I mean, and where we did the salary increases, not just giving money, but it was really trying to be fair. We've wanted for years to be able to do the decompression and work on the parity study. We haven't been able to, and now that we've had the opportunity to do it, we've done it, I think, masterfully, and and this sets us up not only immediate right now, but this sets us up to really be able to go forward in a much better, fair, and constructive way. Plus, we also focus on priorities that are to better the education. To focus on what our core. Our core goal is, and that's education, the one-time subs. And also at the same time, that's something that's come to us a lot from our community. It was a board priority. The fact that you're able to go through and do all of those things at the same time. It's always great when you could do one, but to be able to do all of those things at the same time and still have a reserve left and do that thing. I hope people understand this when they say it's not rocket science. No, rocket science is a lot simpler than trying to do school budgeting. And this is the masterwork by Ms. Garvey but everybody involved. It takes not only a lot of thought, but a lot of consideration of not only your own position, but other people's position. This is something, along with our educational success, our financial success is something we should be hugely proud of. And with me getting off my soapbox, I will take a motion to approve the recommendation for the budget update.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the superintendent's additional 23-24 budget recommendations as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Moved by Ms. Causey, seconded by Ms. Spear. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. That brings us down to the resolution for the maintenance and override election. Dr. Garrett.
President Hookham, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, based on Ms. Garvey's presentation previously, I'd like to turn action items 7.3 and 7.4 over to her.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Guerin, and cabinet, before you, you have a resolution to call for a maintenance and override election, as well as setting the deadline for submitting arguments for and against the election to the Maricopa County School Superintendent School Elections Office. In addition, should the governing board decide to call for the election, that call for election, there's a new requirement that now we must publish that call for election twice before June 11th in a paper of general circulation a week apart. So should that happen, we will see, you may see those notices out there as well.
Any further discussion? We've discussed this at some length, but Ms. Gresham.
I just have a technical question about, as far as the election, is this going to be a mail-in only election, or will it be, do we know?
That was asked yesterday, and I said, boy, should I know the answer, and I didn't go look it up, and now I just want to hit myself. I can put that in a weekly update. I don't.
No problem, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, our last election was a mail-in ballot only.
We suspect it is, but we'll confirm.
Yeah.
Ready for a motion?
Yeah. Would you like to make a motion, Ms. Gresham?
Sure. I will move that we approve the maintenance and resolution for maintenance and override election.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gresham, seconded by Ms. Causey. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. That brings us up to 7.4, resolution for bond election. Ms. Garvey, it goes directly to you. Pass go.
Good evening again, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Guerin, and cabinet. This resolution here before you is, again, to call for a bond election this November. And it is for the purpose of submitting the question to the voters of the amount of $105 million. So with the vote for this resolution, it also confirms the amount if you go forward for that bond election.
Is there any further questions or discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll also move to vote to approve the resolution for the bond election.
Okay, it's been second. Moved by Ms. Gresham, seconded by Ms. Thompson. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to discussion regarding future meetings. Dr. Guerin.
So we have President Holcomb, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. We have, oh, sorry, I'll move my water bottle. We have one more meeting of the school year, and it will be on June 13th. We will start with, oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. May 30th, this coming Tuesday, we will have a 2 p.m. virtual meeting for a truth in taxation hearing. Led by Ms. Garvey. Then on June 13th, we will start off at 1 p.m. with a study session, and we'll have some ACEs training, which is Adverse Childhood Experience Index. We'll have a demographer update, and I will send you the report next week so you'll be able to look at it in advance, and then you can send Ms. Humphreys questions that we can get to the demographer in advance. It's a quite fascinating read. And then we will also have a strategic plan update that will include some academic achievement results, some initial results, a strategic plan update, and what you can expect for next steps with SIOP planning. Then we'll move into an executive session at 4:30 for a safety update and superintendent evaluation. We will then have, because we're going to try to do every type of meeting we possibly can on this date, we'll have a public hearing on the 23-24 school district proposed budget, moving into the regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. And then our next board meeting won't be closer to the end of July, and Ms. Humphreys will get those all on your calendar. Any questions?
I just have one comment, because I went back and looked at the resolution, and the resolution provides that we're supposed to put arguments for and against by August 11th. So I think if someone wants to step up to drafting, first draft, and put the discussion of our arguments in favor or against the resolutions we just passed. I think that should be added at this. Let's go ahead and add this now while we're thinking about it. Ms. Garvey, you had a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I actually think it might already be on the agenda, but just so you know, the governing board does not submit an argument for bond, only the maintenance and override.
And I'm trying to remember, individually, can the board members submit arguments? I believe is correct for the bonds.
Yes.
But
Individually, yes, as a citizen, I believe.
Right, but as a corporate body, we can't on that, just on the override.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Spear.
And in your comments, you obviously can't say Scott Holcomb board member. You would just be Scott Holcomb.
You know,
I know
that's what I'm stuck with.
Stripping you of that title is
Right. Any other comments or questions about the upcoming board meetings? Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Spears, second by Ms. Thompson. All those in favor say bye. Or vote. That passes unanimously. We are adjourned.